Before we explore this warrior goddess asteroid in our astrological charts, let's look at some of the mythology of Athena. First of all, I love that she shows up in so many different tarot and oracle decks that I use in my daily practice. Here in this particular deck, you will see that she is symbolized with an owl on her shoulder, and that symbolizes knowledge. You'll see an owl with her in many of her depictions. There are so many symbols and themes behind Pallas Athene, Pallas Athena. She's also known as Minerva, which does show up as a completely different asteroid, and we will not be exploring that today. However, Pallas Athena, she was a virgin goddess of wisdom, and she was second only to Jupiter, who is also known as Zeus, king of the heavens. In her importance to classical Greece, Athena's name was given to the city of Athens, the intellectual center of Greek civilization. As the goddess of war and victory, Pallas, a master tactician and strategist, was invincible in battle. And as protectress and guardian of Athens, Pallas used her wisdom to teach populace how to peacefully settle disputes and uphold the law by pacific means. Ever compassionate in her wisdom, she was a firm advocate of merciful justice, which is really interesting. There are a lot of different stories behind her, so we will be exploring a little bit of that before I go into the chart readings. Interestingly enough, in the traditional tarot deck is the Queen of Swords. And when I read about Pallas Athene, I automatically thought of the Queen of Swords. And I often depict myself being an air sign, swords representing air, with this Queen of Swords. So it's really quite interesting to me, this whole exploration of this asteroid and this mythological goddess. So this Queen of Swords speaks of logic, ratio, objectivity, independence, mystification, decisions, individuality, balance, righteousness. She's a helpful woman, and she has a very sharp mind. However, the flip side of that is sharp words, coldness, loneliness, stormy reactions, malice, vengefulness, bad mouth, painful experience, bitterness from the past. So when I read about her in asteroid embodiment and in mythology, Pallas Athena was also represented as a majestic woman sheathed in light draperies. So you can see that in this card depiction, and clad in armor. So there's a little bit, maybe, could possibly be. In her hand, she held a spear and a shield, a helmet upon her head, with her breast covered by a breastplate called the Aegis, made of the skin of a goat, bordered with snakes, in the center of which was the head of the Gorgon Medusa. She was often accompanied by an owl representing wisdom and with a snake for prophecy. So I don't see that in this picture, but it still speaks of that. Maybe in the background here, this bird that is flying, maybe that is her owl, and maybe we just cannot see the snakes. She was credited with advancing the civilizing influence of culture upon humanity, and her gifts are numerous. She invented the flute, the trumpet, the potter's wheel, the first earthenware vases, the plow, rake, ox yoke. As a goddess of the arts and crafts, Pallas served as the patroness of artists, artisans, architects, and sculptors. She instructed humanity in the trades of smithing and metal founding, as well as the art of cooking, embroidery, woolworking, and weaving. And finally, as goddess of health and healing. And I think that's going to be a really big part of what I'll be exploring in the charts, pulling out all of these different qualities and see where they fit in the charts that I'll be analyzing. Pallas Athena taught a variety of medicinal practices, including the secret of regeneration through the Medusa's blood, in which she wore that on her breastplate. So pretty interesting. Very full-faceted goddess, if you ask me. In addition to the owl symbolism as an animal totem for her, you'll see that she is donned in snakes. This is just one depiction, as she usually has snakes at her feet and on her breastplate, but not in this particular photo. And this is an unfoldment that, with this serpent symbolism, brings her gift of prophecy, is derived from this relationship with the qualities of the serpent. So it's not something to be shunned. This is where we're getting our intuition, that divination gift, the psychic gift, telepathic powers. And so also too, back in ancient times, it was said that either people would allow themselves to be bitten by a snake, or they would drink the venom of a snake because it would create hallucinations. And therefore, they would have this insight of prophecy because it would connect them with another realm. So that is what this symbolism is representing. And that venom caused divinatory visions. And for this reason, the serpents became symbols of wisdom and the guardians of prophecy. So that's what the purpose of that is. And I think wherever she shows up in our chart is where we have stronger psychic abilities. In this oracle card, you'll see that Athena is represented by the theme of justice. And that was one of her principal creative, intelligent embodiments. Her character is goddess of wisdom and justice, protectress of the state. She's the spear of the her glyph is the spear of the protectress. Her symbols are the owl, serpent, olive tree, shield and spear, staff, aegis, which was her breastplate with the Gorgon's head. Her associated rulerships, because of the knowledge, that would be Aquarius, and then Libra for justice. But she also had the creative qualities that are associated with fire energy. Fire is creative energy. She was a master weaver, and so that would be Leo energy. So we have air and fire here as her main rulerships. Another card from another oracle deck speaks of inner wisdom. It's that inner knowing, our gut instinct, our gut intuition. And this says, you know what to do. Trust your inner wisdom and take appropriate action without delay. Never hesitated. She always was spot on, point on, knew exactly what her next move was going to be. That's why she was a master strategist. Her polarities are courage and fear. So she brings out both of those things in all of us, but it just depends on where is she showing up in your chart, in my chart, in everybody's chart. Right now, she has moved into the sign of Pisces, and that is deep telepathic knowing without words. So it will be very interesting when we get to explore that. Astrologically, Pallas Athena represents a type of intelligence that extends far beyond the mental synthesis of the Gemini and Sagittarius polarity, which is also air and fire. Instead, she symbolizes creative intelligence, the flash insight of Aquarius that spawns new and original formulations of pre existing possibilities of Leo. Pallas Athena is the indicator of our intelligence and style of perception. So wherever she shows up in your chart or where she's transiting in the sky right now is how we will be perceiving incoming information or information that is divinely available to us. In the horoscope, she describes our capacities for inspired vision, intuition, curiosity, genius, and exceptional perception, which I'm finding absolutely fascinating. Now, of course, not everything is all strawberries and roses. There are stressful aspects to Pallas. However, she can point to a number of problems in both visual and auditory perceptions, color blindness, dyslexia, poor hand-eye coordination, limited vision and hearing, difficulties in learning, and other different things that have been cropping up as far as not only dyslexia, but autism and other forms of different developmental properties. But although some people feel that those are stressful things, I want to point out that there was a Theban warrior, I guess, and when he watched her bathing naked in a lake, he was blinded by her sight. However, this goddess bestowed upon him the miraculous powers of insight and oracular prophecy. So, although he was not able to see with his eyes, he gained other benefits and other gifts from Pallas. So, we should never be judging or measuring people by, oh gosh, what we may perceive as a deficit. I guess that's the word I'm looking at, because those people may have extrasensory gifts that you don't have. We all have different abilities, and new emerging abilities are coming out with the crystal children and the indigo children that are being born, since the 60s, and our perceptions are being heightened. And I really think that that's why this goddess is so important, because she's really stepping forward, and there's a lot of energy coming from her, and she's stepping into her empowerment. Pallas as a significator of the arts is very interesting. Pallas Athena's wisdom ray of creative intelligence expressed itself in three primary areas of human activity: the arts, healing, and political activism. So in classical Greece, Pallas served as a patroness of artisans and craftspeople, and she also taught the practical arts and crafts that enabled humanity to develop a more civilized culture. Her wisdom also inspired artistic vision, thus enabling the artist to infuse image into form and soul into art. Astrologically, Pallas Athena signifies that artistic ability which utilizes clear sight and perception of whole patterns. So I really want us to focus on that because that theme keeps coming up over and over and over again. Our clear vision, clear sight, our perception of patterns in the world, seeing beyond what is really right in front of our faces. She figures prominently in the charts of individuals involved in visual arts, drawing, painting, graphics, design, photography, and film. She's also the astrological ruler of all crafts, pottery, embroidery, woolworking, and weaving, etc. So that's really interesting because there were 16 volunteers for the chart analysis. And I'm wondering, out of those people, what your creative abilities are. And I would love to hear from everyone how, if you don't feel that you're creative, which in my opinion, we all are creative, but if you're not, maybe after this video and chart analysis and you learning more about Pallas Athena in your own chart, maybe that will spark a little, creative fire within you to create something fantastic. So as I mentioned earlier, Pallas Athena is sometimes referred to as Minerva, even though Minerva as an asteroid is a completely different asteroid. So I'll have to explore how that figures into it. But she also has been known by many other names in different cultures. When it comes to the healing arts, she was known as Hygeia, and I believe that's a different asteroid in astrology, but I'll have to explore that separately outside of this. So, from what I read, she's a goddess of miraculous healing, and legend has it that she gave Asclepius a vial of blood from Medusa's severed head and instructed him to use it to revive the dead and regenerate the living. Interesting. Astrologically, Pallas governs those healing techniques that integrate mind and body. Such holistic health therapies have gained a large following since the activation of the asteroid functions in 1973. So that's when she was discovered. And if you think about it, you go back into a little bit further back into history. That's really when holistic health was starting to begin. And I can't think of the term. New Age. That's it. So it was the New Age movement, into the holistic arts, into astrology and tarot, and all of that was starting to emerge again, because back 100 years ago, everyone lived this way, 100 years ago, thousands of years ago. That's how they lived. They lived holistically. Everybody ate organic because there were no GMOs. Everybody used herbs and plants that were in their garden. I personally plant certain plants and tons of different herbs and flowers and medicinals for those purposes. And that is also a creative art. So if you are thinking to yourself after my last little blurb where I talked about that creative spark, holistic healing is also a creative art. So specifically, Pallas governs all mental self-healing techniques, everything from the mind. So, kind of like a mind over matter, a Muda Kwan, mind control, guided imagery, hypnosis, meditation. Pallas Athena governs all of that. In the psychological area, Pallas Athena rules those psychotherapies which integrate and balance whole patterns of the psyche. These include Gestalt therapy, transactional analysis, bioenergetics, and psychodrama. In physical healing, Pallas acts to activate, balance, and redirect the vital energy currents that flow through the body. Hence, she heals through such sciences as polarity therapy, acupuncture, homeopathy, macrobiotics, and cellular regeneration. Now, my sources that I got this information from are fairly old. The original book from Demetra George and Douglas Bloch was written in 1984, and then it was updated, I believe, maybe in 2005. So I'm recording this in 2021, and I have been experiencing so many different healing modalities with sound healing and electrostimulation, ultrasound, red light therapy, due to some injuries that I have. And there are just so many emerging modalities that at the time this book was written, there were just only a few and not too many people knew about it. But nowadays, you can basically heal yourself just through music, good nutrition, meditation, and I know it sounds frou-frou, but I fully believe it. You know, I won't get into it right now, but I had some tuning fork therapy on ligaments that I had torn, tissue that had torn, hairline fracture in my ankle and foot, and through electronic stimulation, ultrasound, and tuning fork, sound healing, my foot and my ankle have healed so quickly. I was supposed to get a cast today, right before I recorded this, and I don't need it because I'm already healing. So that's Pallas Athena, and I think that's maybe why I'm doing this, because I have felt so inspired by the holistic healing arts, that it's just emerging within me. I personally have Pallas Athena in Aquarius, and so we'll be exploring that in a little bit. It's important for me to point all of these things out before I start to dive into the astrological charts, so that we all understand who this warrior goddess is. Pallas, she was a woman in a man's world. She was strong, full of wisdom and courage, and she functioned as a prototype for the creative, intelligent woman, like Vesta, who is another asteroid goddess that I'll explore at a later date. She was a virgin goddess, and she was sexually chaste and had no husband or lovers, but I'll explain to you why. And this will show up in our charts, so this may resonate with some of you. Now, whether you're a man or a woman watching this video, we all have this asteroid in our charts, and we all get these qualities. So you have to think back that she was not born from her mother. Zeus had swallowed her mother, and then Athena sprouted from his forehead, the top of his head, and then they became very close. She had attained a high degree of prestige on Mount Olympus because of this. Now, what's interesting is she is associated with androgyny, and because she expressed both her male and female sides. You have to think about one of her rulerships being Libra and that balance of the scales. She symbolized the movement of soul development towards androgyny, that we should all be embracing both our male and our male and feminine sides, masculine and feminine sides. However, in today's world, there are so many people that do not associate with masculine or feminine. Maybe they are binary. So I'm not trying to offend anybody. This is a fully embraced, all-inclusive video for whoever watches it. I'm just pointing out some ancient text and ancient mythology, and we all know that back a couple thousand years ago, it was, pretty black and white. And I don't mean that in a pun in any way, but it was masculine, feminine. And we all do have those qualities. However, some of us may associate with neither or with something completely different. Just taking from the information that was available to me at the time, recording this. All right. Her association with the sign Libra points to her role in balancing the internal polarities that are within all of us. Astrologically, individuals with a prominent Pallas will seek companionship rather than the passion in their other relationships. So they will some people seek to couple up, whereas other people love to remain single and have, many different friendships, relationships. And all see that in society. The fruits of such a path are usually an abundance of friends and concurrent scarcity of lovers. In some instances, the same individual can function as both friend and lover. Another result of this androgyny is the deconditioning of sex role typing. So I think this is really great for what is emerging in humanity, with people embracing who they are and what they do or do not associate with. I think this is another reason why Pallas is really emerging and growing in strength, and my need to talk about her. Pallas, when it comes down to sexual identity imbalances in the movement towards androgyny, non-binary, or dissociations, individuals sometimes hurtle past the balance point and they polarize to one end of the spectrum or the other. Pallas indoning Jupiter's Aegis, which is this breastplate, overly identified with her father. Astrologically, therefore, Pallas-type women tend to over-identify with the masculine and develop those types of personalities in pure form. And this archetype can manifest as the Amazon, a pre-Hellenic personification of Pallas. In modern society, it can depict and receptivity. And this also goes for men, all right? Because we're trying to find the balance on both sides. Achievement, power, success became the goals of fulfillment and precluded the emotional and sensual life of this woman. That's why she was single, because she was so intelligent and so powerful that, truthfully, it frightened a lot of men. And there weren't any people that were her equal, and she wasn't willing to settle. And I can relate to that in many different ways. Part of her theme is father complexes. And so you want to look out for those in your charts because she was so close to her father. She related more to Zeus or Jupiter than she did her mother. In addition to that, really her masculine side stepped forward. And while she was respected and admired in the world of men, she was never validated for being a woman. Her mental and creative abilities were highly praised, but they were not recognized as feminine qualities. Hence, her womanly needs for love, tenderness, and closeness were denied. Likewise, in our culture, women that show that they have a brain and that they're smart and sharp are applauded for their victories, in the workplace, but they weren't asked, or even in school, but they were not asked to the prom. Women are taught that worldly success will threaten a man's ego and highlight his own failings. For example, due to the commonly held belief that book learning in women makes for uppity wives. This is funny. This goes to show how old this information is. Daughters are taught to play dumb as a means of attracting men. And I think a lot of women still do that. In 1984, when this book was published originally, there was a men's magazine and they were polled. Many men were asked what type of a woman they were attracted to. One who has brains, or one, that doesn't, so to speak, whether it's true or not. And the men responded, they have to have enough brains not to act smarter than them. And I think we've really come a long way in the last almost 40 years. Thank goodness. We still have a long way to go. But in a man's horoscope, a similar situation exists. Here, Pallas would depict a highly developed intellectual or artistic male who fears being rejected for not being macho or manly enough. So men who embrace their softer side could conversely, be afraid or be rejected for not being manly enough. I think, we've moved so far beyond that in a lot of society. Obviously not all, but I think Pallas Athena is speaking to more inclusivity amongst all of us, and not to be judgmental of our intellectual gifts or our creative gifts, and just to accept each other as we are. So yeah, and it's just very interesting that in order for her to be revered and respected as highly intelligent and creative and the warrior that she was, she had to forego love. And that's why I love this particular card, because it says detach from the drama. There's no drama allowed in here. In and amongst all of the gods in Mount Olympus, and this would be Zeus, I believe this may be Athena, possibly. Over here, the soul work that we're about to do with the analyzation of these charts is Pallas as an archetype is rooted in the assumption that femininity and mental creativity are mutually exclusive in a world that considers strength, courage, and intellectual prowess to be masculine. A woman who expresses these qualities is expected to divorce herself from her femininity. Thus, the soul work for Pallas Athena woman is to recover her lost feminine origins, to see herself not as a goddess who has renounced her femininity, but as one who teaches us to recognize courage and vulnerability, creativity and receptivity as equally feminine qualities. And I think this goes for men and women, because we all need to be vulnerable, creative, receptive, and a little bit softer and kinder and more compassionate. Remember, the warrior lives within all of us. And so now we will get on to the chart work, what you've all been waiting for. Pallas sign. So this is her symbol in the chart. It's supposed to symbolize a spear, the spear that she holds. The Pallas sign or warrior sign predicts how you will react in a crisis situation, how you see patterns, and how you will solve problems. However, we also have to remember that she is the goddess of wisdom. So she's an indicator of wisdom and intelligence. And I'll point that out in each of our charts, because each sign that Pallas is in has special properties and special gifts. There's a range of intelligence and genius in every one of us. She's also the patroness of artisans, and she values the arts. So we will see how we could possibly spark that creativity within all of us, whether it's visual arts, drawing, painting, graphics, design, photography, domestic crafts, spinning, weaving, knitting, sewing, pottery, smithing, metallurgy, musical instruments. I want to throw cooking in, because I think that cooking could be another art form. There are so many different art forms that it's not all just drawing and painting, and dance is also included, poetry, writing, so many different artistic values are available to all of us. Let us not forget that Pallas, in her aspect as Hygeia, she signifies holistic healing powers, which we can all tap into and try to emerge within each of us. This would be mental healing, visualization, hypnosis, affirmation, physical healing through balance, polarity, macrobiotics, acupuncture, homeopathy, cellular regeneration, energy healing through channeling, purifying, polarizing currents, psychological healing through balance and integration, and anything that is healthy and holistic. We could also benefit mentally by following Pallas in our own charts. She's also the goddess of justice and protectress of the state. She rules over political activism. Isn't that interesting? Especially with what has been going on globally for the last several years, or the last decade, really, all over the world, political uprisings everywhere. She's the defender of justice, law, legal matters. She's the people's champion, defender of minority groups, nukes, sprays, whales, all animals, aged, young, racial, ethnic, arts of peace, mediator, diplomacy, counselor, fair. She's a witness for those that need one. Martial arts, kung fu, tai chi, aikido, fencing, and militant feminism. Pallas also supports excellence in the professional world, which would involve career training, vocational guidance, discrimination, and sexism in the professional world. So all of these themes, pay attention, because all of these themes are going to be emerging since she just emerged from the sign of Aquarius and is now in Pisces. I wish I would have done this back when she was in Aquarius, which is her main sign that she comes from. But now we're diving into the depths of the ocean with the little fish. Pallas has moved into Pisces. I am going to start analyzing the charts in astrological order from Aries all the way through Pisces. And I will be pulling up the volunteer that corresponds with each astrological sign. And we're going to be doing some chart analysis. So sit back, stay tuned, pop your corn, and let's learn a little about our astrological charts.